Hey everybody, Kevin here, and in this video we're going to look at conditional fields within TypeRocket. The reason for conditional fields is pretty straightforward. It's when you have an interface that's simple like this, it's easy to use for the customer. When you have 50 custom fields and maybe only a few of them need to be used based on the values of some other fields, that can get complicated for the client. And so conditional fields are going to be a way for us to hide and show different fields. So for example, we could hide this row field if the letter was A, for example, and then all you would see is the letter field. And that's going to help us clean up our interface so the client doesn't get confused and overwhelmed by the product that you build. And then anytime you create something that's more usable, more friendly for the customer, they enjoy it more. They want to enjoy more of that as they need new features, and they'll be calling you right back. So this is one of the key things in TypeRocket in terms of making your user experience really, really nice outside of just having custom fields that look good. So let's dive into this and see how to create some custom fields. I'm going to refresh this page, and we're going to see a new set of fields here. We'll have these options. It's a repeater field. I'll hit add new, and we're going to have name and value. And this is it. It's going to be very simple, but with this, we're going to be able to deep dive into a lot of the features of these conditional fields. Now, before we get started, a few notes, because your brain may go crazy like mine and start coming up with ideas. Only certain fields can be used for conditional fields. And so those are listed here: radio, toggle, checkbox input, password, text area swatches, several of these fields. Now, this doesn't mean, in terms of these valid fields that can be used for conditional fields, that doesn't mean that you can only hide these specific fields. It means that these fields are the fields that can trigger a condition that would hide something. So if I typed in like robo here, and then the condition for this field, because it's text, it's a valid field, if that check said, hey, anytime somebody types in robo, hide the row and letter fields, then these fields could be hidden even if they were outside of that valid field set, because primarily the conditional fields are for triggering the hiding and showing, not necessarily allowing it, if that makes sense. So that's a lot. Let's get into this so you can see it work. In here we have our form from a previous video where we were making sort of this NVC backend. And we have several fields. So we have that row, letter, and this repeater options that I've added here for the example. Now, conditional fields are pretty easy to work with. For any field, you'll just do text, and you'll say when. So when another field, name, so when name equals robo, then we're going to essentially show this field. I believe that's how it works. So when name equals robo, then this field can be shown. So let's jump over to the browser and check this out. Refresh the page here, add new. So this does not equal robo, so that value field doesn't get shown. If we type in robo, then it shows. Okay, let's jump back here. That's pretty straightforward. What if we want to show this field if the letter is A? Okay, so the way that we would do this, you may try this approach. We'll just take a look. This won't work, but we'll get halfway there. So letter A. Let's go to the browser here, refresh the page. If we change it to A, nothing happens in here. And that's because our conditions are context aware. So what this means is this value field, when we type in name, for example, it works within the context of the level of fields that it's in. So in a repeater field, for example, these fields are grouped inside of this options section. And so this value, when we use when name, it can only reach inside other fields that were inside of this repeater field group. So if I had another field in here called key, let's say, then instead of name, I can also access key, but I cannot access letter or row. just using the name. So whenever we're using this when method, it starts within the context of the actual field that you're targeting to be hidden or shown. However, you can go back levels and kind of navigate to different areas within your sort of field tree structure. So for example, this row field is nested underneath the data. Its parent is data, and then its child, row, and letter are children of data, okay? So sort of draw like a tree in your mind in terms of what that looks like. So let's do some comments here to kind of demonstrate what we're talking about. So our current field structure based on this layout is data. And then underneath data, we have row is one of the fields, and then letter is the other field. Now, we have another structure here, and that's a repeater field. So it's going to be the tree of options. And then inside of options, we can add multiple items. So each one of these items is going to have an index, and that index is typically a number that's like 11 or 13 digits long. So for this, we'll just do star. That'll be one level. And then underneath that star level, we'll have name. We just added key. So key and value. Okay, so when we have this when section here, then this value field can access these two values because they're children or siblings. And so if we want to access this letter, then we're going to have to go back 2 levels, then get access to this data, and then go forward another level. So the way we do this is inside this when section here, we'll go back 2 levels, so back. That's what the little back tick means. And now that we're back at this base level where options exists, then we can access from this options root level essentially data. So we can say data. And then we can move up a level with dot syntax here. And so dot, what do we need? Let's say row, or actually we want the letter. So we're going to go back 2 sections from value, 1, 2. We're going to jump into data, and then we're going to jump into letter. And then we're going to say, if you're A, show it. So we'll save that, go here, refresh, change it to A, and we'll see that value shows, tick it off, then the value is gone. So we're moving kind of around this tree structure of fields. One of the other things that we can do here, if we want to reach down to the root level of all fields, I believe we can do /. So this is the root, so we don't have to dive back. And this is kind of helpful. If you had like a repeater field and a repeater field inside of a repeater field, then you'd end up with like 6 of these arrows. You don't really want to do that if you're going to reach for one of these root elements. So you can just add that / there, and that should do the same. Refresh here, add new, A, and then value will pop right back up. Now, there's a lot more you can do with conditional fields that we won't go over here, but it's all covered in the documentation. The key pieces are that I'd like to just mention here are the logic operators. So the logic of this works whether the value is equal, greater than, less than, or contains. So if we do contains here, I will show you an example actually. So we'll say contains, and then we'll do name. If name contains the letter A, then we will show it. So I can type all these letters, and then I'm going to hit A here, and then that will show up. Okay, so the letter A exists within it. So this can be nice, like for example, if you had example.com and you wanted to have a special field for anything that contained .com, and then maybe .org domains had some other feature that you wanted. So you could kind of play with that option there. And then the other piece under this logic are JavaScript functions. And so you can actually pass a function name inside of this condition that's in your JavaScript. So if we had a JavaScript function, let's say, I know this is PHP, so forgive me for this, but let's just say that this is JavaScript. Let's say we had one called check. So we could take this and we're going to get a value, and then based on whatever that value was, we would return true, I believe, something like this. And then we could have, again, pretend this is JavaScript, not PHP. Instead of contains, we could put our JavaScript function name here, and then we could begin to check this value and decide whether or not we want to show this field. And I believe that this is documented down here. So you'll have the field value and then the rule name. And you can kind of, or the rule value. So the rule value would be, say, greater than or less than 1. Then the rule value would be 1. The field value would be whatever is passed back to the function. And then we can compare those to decide how we want to do things. And then that's it for the conditions. And then to wrap up, you can kind of put a few of these together. So let's go back to data.letter. And then we can also say when name equals A. Okay. So when the letter is A and when the text name is A. So we can essentially have multiple options on this and say all of these conditions have to be true to show this field. So we can go back here. This has to be A, and then this has to be A. Let's see what I did wrong here. When data.letter, check, here we go, equals A. Let's refresh. Okay, A. I'll put the letter A in here, and there you have it. So this is how they work at a basic level, and you can do these when conditions on a few different elements. It isn't restricted just to fields. I believe we could do like a whole section here. So form section. So we can basically create like a section of fields, and this will allow us to like hide and show quite a few things at one time. Sorry, I need to move that in here. Paste that, comma here. All right, here we go. Refresh the page, row equals A. Nothing is going to show because we have those two conditions. So we need to remove this one, save it. And then we're testing for letter, so we actually need to access row here. So we'll say when row is A. Row is A, and then we'll get all of these additional fields shown to us. So that's a way to like show a chunk of a form, for example. And there you have it. That's how you use conditional fields. And feel free to play around with this and build your own interfaces that look great and work really well for the client. And then all of the documentation you need is here on the conditional fields section of the documentation.